What we are telling you right here on NDTV 24/7 is the big breaking news. The hearing of the BCCI versus, of course, in the Supreme Court, talking about whether N. Srinivasan should actually step down or step aside, has started. What we do know is that the BCCI lawyers have already spoken to the Supreme Court judges and told them what their offer is. What is their offer? They want N. Srinivasan not to step down, but actually to step aside. In addition to that, what they want is that N. Srinivasan actually be allowed to continue as the ICC president, which he will obviously be taking the position of in June. In addition to that, they also want that they want a time-bound inquiry. They are promising the Supreme Court that they will have a time-bound inquiry. Now, remember why this is happening? Because the BCCI told the Supreme Court that let us have our own fresh probe. Remember the first probe that they had found nobody guilty. This one they want in accordance with of course the Chennai police. They are saying that we'll have a time-bound probe which will be conducted by the Chennai police. So you will not be able to, nobody in the BCCI will be actually able to influence it. So you can trust us on that. In addition to that, what they are saying is that Srinivasan actually be allowed to continue as the ICC president, which he will be taking the position in June, of course. Now, what we do know currently is that the Supreme Court has actually heard the matter. They have heard the proposal, and now what they're saying is that they will pass appropriate orders in the interest of the game. Also, they are saying let both sides finally argue the matter, and then they will actually pass an order. This is stuff that's coming right here on NDTV 24/7. This is fresh news. Remember, just to actually go back to what had happened in the beginning, day before yesterday, the Supreme Court had told the BCCI lawyers that N. Srinivasan must step down and not step aside, which basically means that he must resign in order for any kind of cleaning happening in cricket. And they gave him till today. This morning, the BCCI has come up with a compromise formula saying that he will step aside, there will be a time-bound inquiry, and you please let him continue as ICC president. The court has heard what has happened and already heard the BCCI lawyers. Now they will let both sides argue the case. Charu Sharma joins me now, cricket commentator, well known, has already voiced his opinion about how one man cannot be hanged for an entire scandal. Charu, do you believe that the Supreme Court could actually buy this actual formula?
Yeah, so, it's possible. I will say it's possible, because if he does step aside and not down and doesn't interfere with the daily workings of the board, it could be argued that an independent probe committee, and especially if it's constituted by the Supreme Court or if it contains all the other governmental aspects such as police or the CBI or whoever they wish to appoint, can go ahead and do their job. The only reason I believe that that if he steps aside and not, if he has to step down, it can only happen if the rest of the board says, Mr. Srinivasan, listen, this is too much of a slide on the board. This is something that we can't possibly have happening to the cricket board or the game, and perhaps it's best if you step down. But if the rest of the committee and the rest of the board supports him, then, why disturb a legally elected body just because of the possible interference of one man? If he does step aside and the inquiry goes about and does its job, why must we presume that he can interfere deeply if he steps aside and cannot interfere quite as much if he steps down? So I think the court may also see some reason here. The only thing that they may not agree to is this time-bound business. I don't think the board has any business telling the Supreme Court that, please make sure that you do it in a time-bound fashion. This inquiry could take a month or 2 years.
No, they're actually saying, Charu, what they're actually proposing is that they themselves hold a time-bound inquiry which will be conducted not by them but by the Chennai police, not the Supreme Court's independent inquiry.
Well, I don't know who will conduct this inquiry, but if it's not independent and completely independent, if the board has anything to do with the constitution of this inquiry committee, then again, there's a possibility it could be a sham. So, the constitution of this inquiry committee or panel needs to be extremely independent, otherwise we're really wasting everybody's time.
Right. Charu, I just want to go back to June last year when N. Srinivasan actually did step aside and not step down despite immense pressure, people resigning within the BCCI, etc., etc. Now, this compromise formula would actually see N. Srinivasan just stepping aside. And if at all that is approved by the Supreme Court, then when he steps aside, how can we as a general cricket-loving people be trustworthy of the fact that he would actually not influence the probe? They are saying that they will let the Chennai police do the probe and they will not do it, but then this is a Chennai man. He has a very strong hold in Chennai too. So do you think, like you just said, that the Supreme Court will even entertain this kind of a proposal?
Well, if he's a strong man or a very influential man in Chennai or perhaps in large parts of the country, then does it really matter whether he step down or step aside, because he can still interfere as an individual? I just said this a short while back. I don't think he's going to physically disappear. It's not that he's not going to have a voice anymore, regardless of whether he's the BCCI president or stepped aside or stepped down. So I think as an individual, he has an enormous possibility of influencing probes. So I do think we are getting away. You know, this is the what's it called, the trees in the wood, if you know what I mean. So if I think the critical thing here, Amitoj, is to make sure that this inquiry panel is completely independent. If the board is in any way influencing the setting up of this committee, then it really all comes to naught anyway. But if the Supreme Court can step in and do a big service to the sport and insist that this is a fair court-appointed inquiry committee, including all the other officials, police, and every other investigating authority, only then can it really make any progress. And in that case, it doesn't really matter whether Mr. Srinivasan is possibly going to interfere as an individual, as a board president, or somebody who stepped down or stepped aside. You see what I mean? Because unless he is made to disappear from this part of the world, he can interfere in many capacities. But if you have an independent probe panel, then the chances are that he or others who are affected will not be able to interfere with the working of this inquiry committee.
Right.
That is the key.